In politics, a mafia state is a state system where the government is tied with organized crime to the degree when government officials, the police and/or military became a part of the criminal enterprise. According to U.S. diplomats, the expression mafia state was coined by Alexander Litvinenko. Particular applications of the concept. In a critical review of Moises Naim's essay in Foreign Affairs, Peter Andreas pointed to the long existence of Italian mafia and Japanese yakuza, writing that there were close relationships between those illicit organizations and respective governments. According to Andreas, these examples speak against incidences of mafia states as a historically new threat. In Italy, three main mafia organizations originated in the 19th century, the Cosa Nostra originating from the region of Sicily, the Camorra originating from the region of Campania, and the 'Ndrangheta originating from the region of Calabria. Former Prime Minister of Italy, Giulio Andreotti, had legal action against him, with a trial for mafia association on March 27, 1993 in the city of Palermo. The prosecution accused the former Prime Minister of making available to the mafia association named Cosa Nostra for the defense of its interests and attainment of its criminal goals, the influence and power coming from his position as the leader of a political faction. Prosecutors said in return for electoral support of Salvo Lima and assassination of Andreotti's enemies, he had agreed to protect the mafia, which had expected him to fix the Maxi trial. Andreotti's defense was predicated on character attacks against the prosecution's key witnesses, who were themselves involved with the mafia. Andreotti was acquitted on October 23, 1999. However, together with the greater series of corruption cases of Mani Pulit, Andreotti's trials marked the purging and renewal of Italy's political system. The Camorra Casalesi clan rose in the 1980s, gaining control of large areas of the local economy partly by manipulating politicians and intimidating judges. The clan was heavily involved in the Naples waste management crisis that dumped toxic waste around Campania in the 1990s and 2000s. The boss of the clan, Gaetano Vasallo, admitted to systematically working for 20 years to bribe local politicians and officials to gain their acquiescence to dumping toxic waste. Kosovo, a partially recognized breakaway state from Serbia, was called a mafia state by Italian MEP Pino Arlacchi in 2011 and also by Moises Naim in his 2012 essay Mafia States in Foreign Affairs. Naim pointed out that Prime Minister of Kosovo Hashim Thaçi is allegedly connected to the heroin trade. Many other crime allegations have been made and investigated by several countries against Thaçi. Naim also labeled Montenegro as a mafia state in the same essay, describing it as a hub for cigarette smuggling. Transnistria, an unrecognized breakaway state from Moldova, has long been described by journalists, researchers, politicians, and diplomats as a quasi-state whose economy is dependent on contraband and gun running, with some having directly referred to Transnistria as a mafia state. For instance, in 2002, Moldova's president, Vladimir Voronin, called Transnistria a residence of international mafia, smuggling stronghold, and outpost of Islamic combatants. Attempts of customs blockade followed the allegations. Reacting to the allegations, Russian state-run RTR aired an investigative program revealing that Transnistrian firms were conducting industrial-level manufacturing of small arms purposely for subsequent illegal trafficking via the Ukrainian port of Odessa. According to the program, the trade was controlled by and benefited from Transnistria's founder and then ruler Igor Smirnov. However, more recent investigations and monitoring missions did not prove continuity in arms trafficking concerns. According to regular reports of the European Border Assistance Mission to Moldova and Ukraine, EUBAM, there have been no signs of significant weapons smuggling from Transnistria. During the press conference on November 30, 2006, head of EUBAM Ferenc Banfi officially stated that organized smuggling of weapons in Transnistria did not exist. In 2013, Ukrainian Foreign Minister and acting chairman of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, Leonid Kozera gave an interview to El País, commenting on the situation in Transnistria and results of work of the EUBAM mission. According to Coursera, there have been no cases of arms traffic found. Some experts from Russia and Transnistria state that allegations of Transnistria being a mafia state, black hole of Europe, and heaven for arms trafficking, etc. are a carefully planned defamation campaign paid by the Moldovan government and aimed at producing a negative image of Transnistria. Officials from the European Union and the OSCE say they have no evidence that the Tiraspol regime has ever trafficked arms or nuclear material. Much of the alarm is attributed to efforts by the Moldovan government to increase pressure on Transnistria. The term has been used by slain Russian dissident Alexander Litvinenko and media to describe the political system in Russia under Vladimir Putin's rule. This characterization came to prominence following the United States diplomatic cables leak, which revealed that U.S. diplomats viewed Russia as a corrupt, autocratic kleptocracy centered on the leadership of Vladimir Putin, in which officials, oligarchs, and organized crime are bound together to create a virtual mafia state. In his book titled Mafia State, journalist and author Luke Harding argues that Putin has created a state peopled by ex-KGB and FSB officers, like himself, who are bent on making money above all. In the estimation of American diplomats, the government of Russia effectively is the mafia. Russian-American journalist Masha Gessen has also described Russia as a mafia state. According to the New Statesman, the term had entered the lexicon of expert discussion several years before the cables leak, and not as a frivolous metaphor. Those most familiar with the country had come to see it as a kleptocracy with Vladimir Putin in the role of capo di tutti capi, dividing the spoils and preventing turf wars between rival clans of an essentially criminal elite. In 2008, Stephen Blank noted that Russia under Putin is a state that European officials privately call a mafia state that naturally gravitates toward mafia-like behavior. Nikolai Petrov, an analyst at the Carnegie Moscow Center, said it's pretty hard to damage the Russian image in the world because it's already not very good. The term pekanate, created from the underworld slang, has also been used to describe Russia's political system. A 2001 article conducted an analysis of actions undertaken by Fidesz, the then newly established governing party in Hungary, which it deemed to be aimed at dismantling the institutional framework of the rule of law. This approach introduced novel concepts such as the organized overworld, the state employing mafia methods, and the adopted political family. While initially met with skepticism by many, who regarded these concepts as metaphors rather than integral elements of a coherent framework, a significant shift occurred a decade later. In the 2010 elections, Fidesz secured a commanding two-thirds majority in parliament. Subsequently, both the party and the state itself came under the sway of a single individual, who adeptly applied techniques honed within the party to exert control over society at large. In a departure from the trajectory observed in other post-communist systems, where segments of the party and secret service assumed control over both political power and wealth, Fidesz, as a relative newcomer, aggressively reshaped the elite landscape to assert dominance. The modus operandi of the post-communist mafia state revolve around concentrating power and wealth within the confines of the clan. However, unlike traditional mafia structures reliant on direct coercion, the mafia state achieves its objectives through ostensibly legitimate means such as parliamentary legislation, legal prosecution, tax enforcement, police action, and utilization of secret services. Mexico. The scholar of law and economics Edgardo Buscaglia describes the political system of Mexico as a mafiacracy. Buscaglia characterizes the condition between the state, the economy, and organized crime in Mexico as a mutual interweaving. Mexico has also been labeled as a narco-state, a political and economic term applied to countries where all legitimate institutions become penetrated by the power and wealth of the illegal drug trade. Other. Venezuela under President Hugo Chavez has also been evaluated as creating the conditions for President Nicolas Maduro to consolidate a mafia state, according to political scientists in policy studies in 2021. Moises Naim, Venezuelan writer and the author of Illicit, How Smugglers, Traffickers, and Copycats Are Hijacking the Global Economy, wrote in an article for the American magazine Foreign Policy, in Mafia states such as Bulgaria, Guinea-Bissau, Montenegro, Myanmar, Ukraine, and Venezuela. The national interest and the interests of organized crime are now inextricably intertwined. During the 1990s, Aruba, an overseas constituent country of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, was alleged to be a mafia state under then Prime Minister Henny Eamon. The Sicilian Contriera Caruana mafia clan was said to own over 60% of the island through investments in hotels, casinos, and donations towards Eamon's election campaign. These claims later turned out to be exaggerated, however. According to journalist Masha Jessen, in 2016, sociologist Bálint Magyar popularized the term mafia state to describe the administration of Viktor Orban in Hungary. Magyar argued that Orban's method of taking power in Hungary, removing rivals and politicizing institutions for personal power, created a kind of regime known as a mafia state. Magyar said that other states besides Hungary included Azerbaijan, Russia, and Kazakhstan as of 2016. In 2010, Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi had labeled Switzerland as a mafia state, stating that Switzerland is behaving like a criminal organization and it is involved in money laundering, assassinations and terrorism. Jonathan Benton, the former head of a United Kingdom anti-corruption agency, described Malta as a mafia state where money laundering transactions of hundreds of millions of euros are made every year without any problem. He made this statement while speaking on BBC Radio following the murder of investigative journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia. The United States under President Donald Trump, especially in his second term, has been described as a mafia state by multiple publications. Currently, Indonesia has been described by media as mafia state due to the rise of pre-man influences in the country. On 2025, automakers BID and VanFast has reported that their factory construction workers were harassed by pre-man demanding protection money. There are many widespread accusations that the government has been protecting two rivaling gangs, Gribjaya and Pancasila youth for political and economic interests. For more than half a century, Syria had been under the tight grip of the Assad dynasty, and its ruling system has been described as a mafia state. Due to the Syrian economy being dominated by business people tied to Assad family, control of various services like electricity by loyalist warlords, etc., more than 90% of Syrians live in poverty. The regime also profits from a multi-billion-dollar Kaptagon industry, made of a network consisting of over 35 manufacturing centers and factories, known as the Syndicate, Nikaba. Assad's wife Asma stripped the assets of pro-Assad billionaire Rami Makhlouf and subsequently took control of all foreign charities and UN aid money, enabling the Assads to own revenue money directly. The fall of Rami Makhlouf led to widespread characterizations of Assad acting as a crime boss presiding over a crime syndicate simply designed to enrich himself and his family, deploying violence to advance the interests of his mafia. Businessman Ribal al-Assad, a cousin of Bashar al-Assad who lives in exile, outlines the situation. When it's all boiled down, the family is still in charge. They are very sensitive to internal issues and they know how to manage them. They have a saying, "You may not have to listen to your cousins, but you do need to listen to their mothers." Various academics compare Assad's reign to tribal rule, with Assad as the tribal chieftain glorified by the system and extolled as its savior. Syrian French professor of sociology Burhan Ghaliun asserts that Bashar al-Assad doesn't see Syrians as an independent people, but rather as guests in his family property. Hence, Assad's dictatorship is akin to the colonial project of an invading empire, according to Ghaliun. Syrian historian Rana Kabani designates Assad's dynastic rule as internal colonialism owing to the deep disconnect of the regime's post-colonial ruling classes from its native population and their blatant disregard for Syrian wealth and lives. Describing how neo-Ba'athist ideologues and Assadist security apparatus constructed a totalitarian state built around cult of personality to the Assad dynasty, Rana Kabani writes. When Bashar al-Assad's father, Hafez, came to power through yet another violent army squabble leading to his coup of 1970, an alarming cult of the leader was systematically formed around him, modeled on Ceausescu. The Romanian dictator was Assad's political ally, strategic advisor in matters of popular repression, and close personal and family friend. In the government school I attended in Damascus between 1971 and 1974, a process of wholesale brainwashing had begun. It was designed to create a population with no political personality or affiliation, other than to the head of what would become, in my children's generation, a vindictive family mafia, monopolizing business and power with the crudest of propaganda machines and the most lethal of security services. In December of 2024, the Assad regime fell. When we refer to mafia states, we are talking about a government that itself is a criminal enterprise. These people running the state have their fingers in everything, and back up their control by violence, the attributes we associate with the mafia. It's important to make a distinction between mafia states and kleptocracies. Mafia states themselves are fairly rare. If you refer to kleptocracies, government by theft, with widespread corruption, those are very common. Kleptocracies are a majority of the developing world. But there are probably only 6 or 7 mafia states, in the sense that their mission is to basically be a mafia-like organization. Mafia states include Kosovo and Montenegro. You could argue that Russia is a mafia state, although Russia is probably in a class of its own. Also Equatorial Guinea. Venezuela is very much a mafia state, because its officials are not interested in running the government anymore. The political elite and military spend their energy not improving security or education, but in setting up offshore accounts and drug deals. Other candidates include Malta and Mexico. Key to understanding the operation of mafia states, and exposing them, is following the money and the resources. Kleptocracies, on the other hand, are everywhere. That's not a strong democracy, and that's much of the world. Most of Africa is made up of autocracies, for example. Votes are manipulated, people are paid off. It's very much a patronage system. Azerbaijan is a kleptocracy. It's a corrupt, autocratic government. They repress people, but most of the money being stolen is to control other people, so that they cannot pose a threat to the governing family. They steal everything, not because they need more money. They just don't want anybody else to have enough money to oppose them. The real problem is when you get state capture. The question is, do you have the power to throw the bums out? If you don't, then essentially you have state capture, and you're probably close to autocracy and kleptocracy. Even where you have democratic institutions in places like Poland and the Czech Republic, countries are backsliding badly. Key to understanding the operation of mafia states, and exposing them, is following the money and the resources. A nation's natural resources are basically things that are of value in and of themselves, so when you dig up that mineral deposit, or when you cut down the tree, it has value. Any kind of natural resource is an industry you want to study, because that's the only thing these autocrats or the mafia states can make money as. In many ways, investigating a mafia state is easier than investigating a crime cartel. Because you still have state records, documents, tenders, companies, you have information. A state is a more transparent entity than an organized crime gang. And you piece together the hierarchy of the organization starting at the top, just as you would with a crime gang. However, often there are informal networks within governments that are more important than the official structure. So, you figure out the people who are most important. You look at who's getting wealthy, who's got the nicest house, who's living close to the president in the fancy new suburb that they've created. This is a beat, and you have to patiently suck up all the information you can find. We use a knowledge management system to connect all the data, and it interfaces with other software. Then you follow the money. For more than 20 years, there have been reliable reports that North Korea is operated like a crime cartel. Case studies. Montenegro is a classic example of a mafia state. It's a small country, only 600,000 people, and was run by someone whose first job in life was prime minister. He had close ties through his brother to organized crime, so they started in the illegal tobacco trade, and the state was actively participating in the trade. We discovered over time the mechanisms that he established to strengthen this corruption. The Prime Minister privatized a bank for his family and started pouring huge amounts of government money into it, and then created rules that forced other people, if they were going to do a deal, to work through this bank. Then he started loaning the money from the bank to himself, his friends, and organized crime. When it failed, he bailed it out with taxpayer money. The wholesale takeover of Venezuela by criminal interests is widely documented. Indictments by the U.S. Justice Department, investigations by the media, and studies by scholars show a government riddled with organized crime at the highest levels. More than 100 Venezuelan officials, including senior members of the Nicolas Maduro regime, have been implicated in such criminal pursuits as fuel smuggling, black market sales of food and medicine, and cocaine trafficking. State coffers, reports incite crime, have been pillaged on an industrial scale. Add to the state control of armed militias and crime gangs, and large numbers of extrajudicial killings, and you have the makings of a criminal state. Another obvious example is North Korea. For more than 20 years, there have been reliable reports that the country is operated like a crime cartel. North Korean officials have been implicated in drug trafficking, counterfeiting, cybercrime, tobacco smuggling, kidnapping, and more. Usually when we see a mafia take over a government, it works from the bottom up. But North Korea is entirely top-down, with rackets organized by government officials, from the top leadership to diplomats in the field. The country's big problem is that it needs foreign exchange. But they sell nothing, and they're international pariahs. So, they counterfeit US dollars, sell drugs, and engage in other criminal activity to earn hard currency. Organized crime gangs typically make their money from an illegal trade like drugs. In a corrupt government, those illicit gains will come from state contracts. Who gets the right to drill oil? Who gets the right to cut down trees? Who owns the phone company? This tells you who are the favorite people in a mafia state. Thank you for watching this video.